environmental stimulation. Tulad nga ng mga sinabi ko dito na tatlo, more socialization, learned skills. Our topic for today is still in childhood, pero this time from middle to late childhood. The previous video, kung hindi mo pa napanood, maybe you can first watch that before you watch this. We talk about early childhood. So for this video, ang pag-uusapan natin is the periods after early childhood, which is middle to late childhood. Basically, para mabilis maalala, yung middle to late childhood refers to the elementary years. Kung ano yung mga bagay na nangyayari sa'yo o nangyari sa'yo during your elementary years, during your grade school years, refers to this stage in childhood. For this video, we are going to talk about the cognitive and the emotional changes that happen during the elementary years. Simulan natin sa cognitive changes. If you want to understand cognitive changes in middle to late childhood, kinakailangan talaga konsultahin mo si John Piaget, a very popular developmental psychologist na gumawa ng cognitive development theory. Sabi ni John Piaget, every stage that we enter into our life, there are certain cognitive changes that happen. At yung mga changes na yan, you can group them according to stages. So, as you can see on the slide, yung mga babies, they are in the sensory motor stage. Yung mga nasa early childhood, they are in the pre-operational stage, while those people in the middle to late childhood years, they are in the concrete operational stage. So, for this video, pag-uusapan natin, ano ba yung mga features o yung mga attributes ng isang bata who is already in the concrete operational period. Okay? The first thing you need to remember in understanding the concrete operational child, according to John Piaget, is that the brain is undergoing rapid growth. And this is due to the following reasons. Kasi yung mga bata during this time, they have more socializations. Remember, they are now capable of interacting with people outside their family members. They are now able to learn many skills. And at the same time, dahil na-expose sila sa outside world, dumadami na rin yung knowledge nila. So, when you combine all these three factors, it really starts or it really initiates the growth of the brain. Now, don't get me wrong, no? The brain will grow itself biologically speaking, but that growth speeds up when you add to it environmental stimulation. Tulad nga ng mga sinabi ko dito na tatlo, more socialization, learned skills, and added knowledge. So, palaki ng palaki yung brain ng mga bata during the middle to late childhood years. That is why, one effect of this is, according to John Piaget, general improvement in their cognitive skills. Another word for the word cognitive is thinking skills. Mas tumatalino na yung mga bata during this time. So in what way are they becoming smarter or in what way are they improving in their cognitive skills? Pag-usapan natin yan. Una, children in this stage improve their categorization skills. In the Piagetian terms, ito yung tinatawag nating seriation. Kids are now capable of grouping objects according to a common quality. So, kaya na nilang maghanap ng mga similarity sa group of objects. They see something in common in a group of objects, and then they will use that something as a basis to group that object into one category. Like, for example, kids can now understand that animals are different from objects, which are different from human beings, because they can spot similarities among animals, similarities among objects, similarities among people, and they use those similarities as a basis to say that this belongs to one group. Take a look at this picture. Naintindihan na ng mga bata na merong common denominator yung mga electronics, merong common denominator yung mga shapes, merong common denominator yung mga animals, and so they use that common denominator to group them. Yan yung tinatawag nating seriation. They are becoming better in doing that. And just to take this one level higher, kids during this time can now understand that under the general class of things, you can also have smaller specific classes. Kaya nga, during this period of their life, they are now capable of understanding the taxonomy of certain things. Take for example, shoes. Nagigets na no mga bata na shoes is a general term, pero under shoes, marami pa yung mga sub-classes of shoes. There are leather shoes, there are rubber shoes. Under leather shoes, marami pang klase yan. Under rubber shoes, marami pang klase yan. So they can now understand the taxonomy of different things in the world, even animals. Naiintindihan na nila na yung mammal, marami pang klase yan. A cat, dog, horse, elephant, they are all mammals. But under each animal that you can see, marami pang klaseng dogs, marami pang klaseng horse, marami pang klaseng elephants, so on and so forth. Kids, during this period, can now understand that idea. Number 2, kids during the middle to late childhood years, a concrete operational child, nag-i-improve na yung kanilang logic o yung kanilang reasoning skills. Like for example, meron na silang tinatawag na principle of identity. They can now get that certain objects simply looks like another object, pero hindi talaga yun yun. One good example of this is when kids play with clays. Di ba? A concrete operational child knows that a clay that looks like a sausage is still a clay. Gets nila yon na mukha lang sausage yung clay, pero clay pa rin yon, hindi siya sausage. You compare that to a pre-operational child, wala pa silang ganong cognitive ability. For them, what they see is what's reality. So when they see a clay shaped like a sausage, they will think that it is a sausage. Hindi pa nila gets na merong mga bagay na kamukha lang ng isang bagay. Pero hindi talaga yun yung tunay na bagay na yon. Okay? So in the pre-operational stage, kids think that way, but that will improve by the time they enter the concrete operational stage. During this time, nagkakaroon na rin sila ng theory of mind. Remember, in the pre-operational child or in the previous lecture video on early childhood, ang mga bata in that stage, wala pang theory of mind. They cannot understand that the way they think is not the same as how other people think. They cannot understand that what they think is not necessarily what others think. A pre-operational child will think that what he or she is thinking is also what other people are thinking. Kaya nga 'di ba yung example ko doon, a pre-operational child, when he or she closes their eyes, pumikit sila, naniniwala sila that all people around the world also sees what they are seeing. So naniniwala sila na lahat ng tao nadidiliman kasi sila mismo nadidiliman when they close their eyes. They cannot yet distinguish the difference between their own way of thinking and other people's way of thinking. Kasi nga wala pa silang theory of mind. That's why if you go back to the previous lecture video, I told you that most kids in the pre-operational level, they are considered to be highly egocentric. Ibig sabihin, meron pa silang parang innocent selfishness. Naniniwala sila na yung takbo ng utak nila, yun din yung takbo ng utak ng buong mundo. But this will change in the concrete operational child. Now they can understand that their state of thinking is not the same as other people's state of thinking. Kaya na ipapasa na nila yung test on theory of mind. If you still remember this from the previous lecture video. This is Sally and this is Anne. Sally has a ball and she puts it into her basket. Tapos anong ginawa? Si Sally umalis. And then pag alis ni Sally, si Anne took the ball in the basket and then put it in the box. And then after that, bumalik si Sally. Ang itatanong doon sa bata, saan hahanapin ni Sally yung bola? A pre-operational child will answer that question in what way? Sasabihin ng bata, hahanapin ni Sally yung bola o kukunin ni Sally yung bola doon sa box. Bakit? Kasi yun yung nakita niya. Yun yung nakita ng pre-operational child. The pre-operational child saw the ball was put inside the box. And so the pre-operational child will think that all people, including Sally, would know that the ball is in the box. But a concrete operational child will answer this correctly. Sasabihin niya na si Sally, hahanapin niya yung bola doon sa basket. Kasi doon niya huling nakita yung bola. If that child is able to answer that way, it shows to us that this child can now differentiate what he or she knows from what Sally knows. Naiintindihan na niya na alam niya na yung bola ay nasa kahon, pero hindi ibig sabihin no na alam ni Sally na yung bola ay nasa kahon. His or her thinking or his or her knowledge is not necessarily Sally's knowledge. Concrete operational kids can already get that. And this has a very big implication relationally speaking. Kasi kapag meron ng ganyang cognitive ability yung bata, ibig sabihin yan, they are now capable of maintaining friendships. Because as you understand, for you to maintain a stable relationship with friends, kinakailangan meron kang theory of mind. Kinakailangan maintindihan mo na hindi lahat ng gusto mo ay gusto rin ng kaibigan mo. Hindi lahat ng ayaw ng gusto ng kaibigan mo gusto mo rin. In fact, if you come to think of it, theory of mind is the foundation of empathy. Diba? You cannot empathize with someone if you cannot understand that people have different mental states. Malungkot siya pero masaya ka. Guess what? How do you empathize? Iintindihin mo kung bakit kahit masaya ka, malungkot siya. You put yourself in another person's shoes. But in theory of mind, again, what theory of mind makes you realize is that people wear different shoes. Okay? So, napakahalaga niyang theory of mind na yan in relationship building. Another key logical skills that kids improve on during this time is decentering. Ibig sabihin, meron na silang capability to consider more than one aspect of the problem, which is very different from a pre-operational child. Remember, the pre-operational child, sinabi ko yata ito sa aking previous video, meron silang cognitive liability known as centration. Ibig sabihin ng centration, kids are very much focused on only one aspect of the problem, and that makes them very ineffective in solving that problem. Pero ang isang concrete operational child, they are now capable of seeing more than one aspect of the problem, which makes them better problem solvers. Para mas malinaw, let me give you an example, di ba? Sinabi ko to sa previous lecture video, no? You show a child two containers with same level of water. And then, you show the child that you pour the content of one container to a taller container. Yan. As you can see in the picture. And then you will ask the child, which container contains more water? Ang isasagot ng pre-operational child is, mas maraming tubig yung container na mas matangkad. Why? Because it looks like it has more water. Kasi matangkad yung container. The child is centrated to the height of the container. Para sa bata, yun yung nagde-determine kung ano ang mas maraming tubig, the height of the container. But a concrete operational child can now decenter. Okay? Marirealize na niya na yes, mas matangkad, mas matangkad nga yung container na yan, mukhang mas marami nga yung tubig in the second container, but nabawasan naman yung kapal ng container, numipis naman. So magka-cancel each other out lang. Although mas dumami nga yung water doon sa second container, mas malaki yung height, pero nabawasan naman yung kanyang width. Therefore, that will just cancel out each other. The answer is they have same levels of water. That is how a concrete operational child would think. They can now decenter. They can now consider more than one aspect of the problem. They don't only see the height, but they also consider the width of the container in answering the question. Number 3, another key change that happens during this time, yung self-concept ng mga bata nagiging mas realistic na. Self-concept is how you describe yourself. It is how you see yourself, how you understand the self. If you ask a pre-operational child, for example, to describe himself or tell you something about him or herself, they will say something like this: I really think that I am not a good person. I always get low grades in my test. I mean, I work really hard, study hard, but I still get low grades. Because of this, a lot of times, I just feel bad with myself. If you notice, yung ganitong self-concept ng bata, very simplistic. Kasi black and white thinking siya pagdating niya sa sarili niya. He is not doing well with something, therefore, he feels bad about himself. 'Di ba? Yung simpleng hindi siya magaling sa test, ginamit niya 'yon as a basis to judge himself as not a good person. But a concrete operational child is way more complex than this. They can now understand that the self has many dimensions. And each of the dimensions of the self may be doing differently compared to the other dimensions. So they now understand na pwedeng maybe you're not doing good physically, but you're doing good emotionally. Maybe you are not doing well emotionally, but you are doing well spiritually. So they can now compartmentalize the self into many components. Hindi lang sila black and white thinking about the self. So a concrete operational child would describe him or herself this way: at school, I'm feeling pretty smart in certain subjects like social studies. I got A in this subject and I am proud of that. But I'm feeling dumb in arithmetic when I see other people performing better than me. I still like myself through, though, because I am still popular in school and that is more important. Now, I would like you to focus more on those words in yellow. Bakit mas realistic na yung self-concept ng bata dito? Because as you can see, na-compartmentalize niya yung sarili niya. Iba yung sarili niya when it comes to social studies. Iba yung sarili niya when it comes to arithmetic. No? Iba yung sarili niya when it comes to his or her popularity in school. So, na-compartmentalize niya yung sarili niya. And this child feels good about the self kasi he or she is doing well in one aspect of the self kahit na hindi siya magaling sa arithmetic. So, hindi siya nag-overgeneralize ng mga conclusions about the self. This is a more complex way and a more realistic way of seeing the self. Children during this stage have now that capability to see the self that way. Number 4, gumagaling din yung kanilang hypothetical thinking o yung kanilang long-term thinking. They are now capable of answering the question, what if? Pre-operational children, they are very focused on the present. Hindi pa nila masyadong pinapansin o iniisip yung mga mangyayari in the future when they do certain things. But a concrete operational child can now predict, can now hypothesize what will happen in the future when they do behaviors in the present. Kaya nga yung mga bata during this stage, marunong na silang magplano. Marunong na silang magplano kung anong lalaruin nila, marunong na silang mag-schedule ng day nila, marunong na silang mag-anticipate ng mga pangyayari in the future because of this cognitive ability. And this has an implication to a person's morality, di ba? Dahil meron na silang ability to understand that their actions will have consequences in the future, this becomes the foundation of the child's morality. They become more moral conscious. They now understand the idea that for every moral action that they will do, there will be moral consequences. So kapag meron kang masamang ginawa ngayon, merong masamang balik yan in the future and vice versa. Yung kabutihang ginagawa mo ngayon, meron ding kabutihan na babalik sa'yo yan in the future. That's why yung mga bata during this time, mas nag-iisip na sila. before they do something. Compare that to a pre-operational child. Ang mga pre-operational children, they are driven by their curiosity. So wala silang pakialam kung may mangyayari ba in the future when they do something. Ang importante sa kanila is to satisfy their curiosity. But a concrete operational child, no. They are now capable of thinking whether a behavior that they plan to do will be morally good or not, or kung meron bang mga consequences yan in the future. Which leads us to number 5. Okay? Another important improvement that happens during this stage, gumaganda yung kanilang moral reasoning. Let me give you an example. One day, Augustus noticed that his father's inkpot was empty and decided to help his father by filling it. So gusto niya punuan ng ink yung inkpot. While he was opening the bottle, he spilled a lot of ink on the tablecloth. The other boy, Julian, played with his father's inkpot even though he knew he shouldn't. Ibig sabihin, sinabihan siya ng tatay niya na huwag laruin yung inkpot, but he still did and spilled a little ink on the cloth. Tapos tatanungin mo yung bata, sino ang mas naughty? Was it Augustus or was it Julian? Guess what? According to studies, yung mga bata in the pre-operational stage will answer Augustus is naughtier. Kasi yung mga pre-operational na bata, again, nandun pa sila sa centration, they will only focus on the amount of ink na natapon. So the reason why they think Augustus was naughtier is because there was more ink na natapon kung ikukumpara mo kay Julian. Pero yung mga bata in the concrete operational stage will answer that si Julian was naughtier. No? Julian was naughtier. Bakit mas naughtier si Julian? Kasi although little ink lang yung natapon, mas konti nga yung ink, pero yung intention kasi ni Julian was to disobey. Sinabihan kasi siya ng tatay niya na huwag gagalawin yung inkpot, ginalaw pa rin niya. So, merong disobedience doon. Kahit na mas konti yung ink na natapon, the fact na dinisobey niya yung tatay niya, Julian is naughtier than Augustus. Si Augustus kasi, although mas marami siyang ink na natapon, pero yung intention niya was to help the father. Concrete operational kids can now see the intention more than the outcome. Again, an indication of decentering. They can now consider more than one aspect of the problem. They see the outcome, they also see the intention. Pero yung mga pre-operational kids, they will only see the outcome and ignore the intention. Another moral reasoning ability that they begin to be very good at is nagigets nila yung idea of moral relativity. They now understand that there are certain moral issues that is considered gray area. Ibig sabihin, hindi klaro. Hindi klaro kung morally good or morally bad. Like for example, if you ask a concrete operational child, is scaling bad? Ngayon, maano na siya, no? Ang sagot na niya, depende. Depende yan sa sitwasyon. Diba? Walang klarong way to say if killing is bad because it always depends on the context where the killing happened. Kung nagsa-self-defense lang naman yung tao, halimbawa, hino-hold up siya, nanlaban siya, accidentally napatay niya yung hold-upper niya, then killing in that context is not wrong because you are in the act of defending yourself. Diba? Pero ang mga batang mga nasa pre-operational stage, again, black and white thinking sila. Whenever they hear the word killing, it is always bad. Any form of killing, regardless in what situation, regardless in what context, it is always bad. Kaya sa mata ng bata na nasa pre-operational stage, maraming masamang tao Diba? Marami kasing pumapatay ng chicken, maraming pumapatay ng baboy. Diba? So when they hear people killing animals, they will conclude that these people killing these animals are bad. But not for a concrete operational child. They will always focus more on the situation, on the context, to say whether something is moral or not. So that's it And that's all for the cognitive changes. Now let's go to the emotional changes that happen during the middle to late childhood stage. The first thing you need to remember during this time is that, sinabi ko na to kanina, lumalaki yung brain ng bata. Pero other than the brain getting bigger, another event that happens during this time is the part of the brain that children are using during this stage also changes. In the pre-operational stage where kids are very egocentric, they are frequently using the lower part of their brain, as you can see on the slide, yung naka-color pink. Yan yung lower part of the brain na madalas ginagamit ng mga bata in the pre-operational stage. But as they grow older, as they grow more mature, as the brain gets bigger, biologically speaking, they will now experience a shift. They are now going to more frequently use the upper part of the brain, the higher part of the brain, also known as the prefrontal cortex. And the thing is, when people use that part of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, we can say that they are becoming more social thinkers. Mas nagiging socially aware sila. Okay? So, kapag yung lower part of the brain yung ginagamit mo, selfish ka. Egocentric thinking yan. Mga pre-operational kids yan. Pero yung mga bata in the concrete operational stage, they are now capable using the higher parts of the brain. At merong mga epekto yan sa kanilang emotional experiences. Number one, because now they are more social, they are now in the age of comparison. Nagiging foundation na yan ng kanilang self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is our degree of belief towards ourselves that we can effectively do certain things. Kung confident ka na kaya mong solusyonan yung mga problema mo, then that means you have a good self-efficacy. So during this time, ito yung nagiging foundation ng self-efficacy ng bata. Because they have a social brain, they keep on comparing what they can do to other kids, especially their classmates when they enter schools. Constantly, they are evaluating their performance compared to others. I am faster, I am more or less intelligent than others, I am more or less athletic compared to my classmates. Ganyan lagi ang brains ng mga bata in the concrete operational stage. Always comparing what they can do relative to what other people can do. And that also includes academic efficacy. Ibig sabihin naman ng academic efficacy, this is your overall belief that you can do well in school. Diba? So kapag feeling mo magaling ka sa eskwelahan, ibig sabihin maganda ang academic efficacy mo. Pero kung mababa ang confidence mo sa performance mo in school, then that means you have a bad academic efficacy. Now, the thing is, this is very crucial. Now that we know that kids during this time keep on comparing themselves to other kids, okay? Napaka-crucial ng proseso na ito in forming within them a healthy efficacy. If a child constantly compares him or herself to people who are always better than them, diba? They might suffer from having low general efficacy. Hindi sila magiging confident sa mga sarili nila. Unfortunately, merong ibang mga practices in the family or even in the school na nakaka-destroy ng kanilang efficacy. One good example would be academic efficacy. And let's talk about schools, no? Halimbawa, yung mga schools na nagpa-practice ng mga sectioning. Pag first section ka, matalino ka. Second section ka, matalino ka rin. Kapag last section ka, hindi ka matalino. Kasi yung general average mo ganito. Imagine if a child is able to internalize that idea. Halimbawa, nasa last section siya. Ano yung magiging epekto nun sa kanyang academic efficacy? Definitely not good. Kasi the child will now realize that the reason why he or she is in that section is because he or she is not good. Tama? I-add mo pa dyan. Paminsan-minsan, hindi naman sa lahat ng pagkakataon, may mga teachers, again, hindi rin naman lahat ng teachers, may mga teachers, meron silang mga classroom practices or meron silang mga sinasabi sa mga students nila na nakakasira ng academic efficacy. specifically for certain subjects. Halimbawa, pagdating sa math, di ba? May ibang mga math teachers, for example, medyo masungit, medyo maikli yung patience when it comes to how students progress in their lesson. Marami sa kanila or may mga kilala ko nakakapagsalita sila ng masasama about the mathematical skills of a child. And the thing is, if the child is able to internalize the negative statement na sinabi sa kanila ng teacher nila about their numerical skills, it might stay with them until the day they grow older. Kaya yung mga bata na mabababa ang academic efficacy pagdating sa mathematics, all throughout their lives, iniiwasan nila yung math. Kaya nga napakahalaga talaga na in the school setting, magkaroon ng kultura yung eskwelahan to preserve or to even enhance the efficacy of its students, even in the family, even with peers. Dapat ginagawa nating kultura yan no? Kinakailangan yung mga bata, meron silang mga positive friendships. When you say positive friendships, they have friends who are constantly encouraging them. Yung pinapalakas yung efficacy nila, hindi yung pinupul sila pababa, hindi yung araw-araw panlalait yung naririnig nila. And I think this is one of the most important responsibility of a parent. Sisiguraduhin dapat ng parents or even teachers na yung mga peers na kinakausap ng isang bata are peers that encourage the child. That's why the school should always promote a culture where in that school, people are lifting each other up. In fact, hindi lang dapat nga sa school yan, dapat it starts with the family, no? Dapat matutunan nung bata yung ganong kultura, ma-experience nung bata yung ganong kultura, where people are building each other up. When you talk to someone, the goal is to make that person better. In fact, that kind of culture, encouraging each other, diba? That is very biblical. Sabi nga dito, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up. This is a very biblical culture that is good for the child's psyche. And that culture of encouragement can start in the family, supported by the school, and also the peers. Sabi nga ng isang author, no, friends give us the courage to lift the blinds on our hearts, to open up and show that we generally keep hidden from the rest of the world. Di ba masarap yung ganyang feeling, no? Yung na-realize mo yung mga bagay na magaganda sa'yo because you were helped by the people you consider your friends. And the opposite is also true. Kaya nga alam nyo, dapat talaga any school, any teachers must take bullying seriously. Hindi talaga maganda ang epekto ng bullying sa mga bata. When they become victims of a bully, their efficacy is literally destroyed. It is literally shattered. Kasi kapag binubuli ang isang bata, kapag nagiging biktima siya ng bully, talagang dinudurog ng proseso ng bullying yung efficacy ng bata. It's like the child gets the idea that he or she cannot do anything right because the bully said so. And so when the child begins to grow up this way, believing that he or she cannot do anything right, in the process of development later on, marami siyang mga psychological problems na ma-encounter. That's why, again, family, the school, even the government should help each other out, should support each other in fighting bullying. Number 2, another effect of their brain becoming more social is they are now capable of experiencing other-oriented emotions. Nandyan na yung shame, nandyan na yung guilt, nandyan na yung pride. In other words, their emotional experience expands. Mas marami na silang mga emotions na kayang ma-feel, 'di ba? I think I discussed this in my previous lecture video, no? For example, here you go. People start with feeling primary emotions. Infancy, primary emotions 'yan. Early childhood, middle to late childhood, unti-unti as we socialize with other people, dumadami na yung emotions na kaya nating ma-feel. We are now capable of feeling guilty, lonely, jealous, optimistic, shameful, so on and so forth. And a lot of these secondary emotions, napaka weird in the child's perspective, because most of these emotions, they will feel this for the first time. That is why very important here is adults should always be there to help the child process the emotions that they are feeling for the first time. First time nilang na guilty, first time nilang maka-experience ng shame, nakaka-experience sila ng pride. How do you handle these kinds of emotions in a constructive way? Okay lang ba na ma-feel mo yung mga emotions na yan? Guess what? Adults must teach children on how to handle these emotions. In developmental psychology, ito yung tinatawag nating emotional coaching. Emotional coaching is a very important process that adults should do when they are dealing with a child. Emotional coaching is very important. Sabi nga ng Bible, di ba, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Guess what? Part of this training that a child should undergo is emotional training. At sino? Sino ang merong responsibilidad in training the child emotionally? None other than the adults that surround the child. Kinakailangan wag natin kalilimutan na i-enhance din yung emotional intelligence ng mga bata. Hindi lang tayo puro IQ. Unfortunately, in traditional schools, it seems like we are overemphasizing the intellectual skills of children, and we are forgetting the importance of their emotional intelligence. In fact, marami mga bata in the future as they enter adolescence or even adulthood, marami silang nagiging psychological problems, maraming mga relational problems silang nararanasan. The main reason is they have poor emotional skills. So one way for you to really ensure a positive development of kids as they grow older is to instill in them solid foundation of emotional skills. Effect number 3, may kinalaman din ito sa emotional skills, no? Because their brain is now more social and they are now more concerned about what other people would do, natututo na silang mag-emotional suppression. They are now more concerned of what others expect them to feel. Ibig sabihin, kaya na nilang magtago ng kanilang emotions. Kaya na nilang mag-pretend o magpakita ng isang emotion na hindi naman talaga nila nararamdaman, simply to show to others that they are able to fulfill other people's expectations. Good example of these emotions are anger and disappointment. Diba, sa kultura natin, yung mga bata, ayaw nating nagagalit sila, ayaw nating nakikipag-away sila. So we expect them in a way not to get angry. Right? Pero yung isang bata, alimbawa, nagagalit siya sa kalaro niya, ano nangyayari? Yung galit niya, itatago niya. Kasi alam niya yung mga adults nakatingin sa kanya, so imbis na i-express niya yung talagang galit niya or ipaalam niya sa adults na galit siya, ang gagawin niya, ipepeke niya yung kanyang behavior. So, the child will begin to act as if he or she is not angry. The same thing with disappointment, 'di ba? I think ito yung nasa picture, no? Halimbawa, this is a very classic study. Magpakita ka ng isang regalo sa bata na ayaw niya. Ipa-excite mo yung bata, rating mo sa kanya na exciting yung gift, and then pagbukas niya yung gift, hindi pala maganda yung gift, what happens? The child would still say thank you, even if deep inside, the child is very disappointed because of the cultural teaching that we teach the child that no matter what other people give to you, you say thank you. Kahit ano pa yung matanggap mo, basta nakatanggap ka, basta merong nagbigay na adult sa'yo, dapat magpasalamat ka. Although tama naman yon. Hindi ko naman kino-question yung idea na yon, but we have to understand that there are a lot of times during this period, kids may not be showing the emotions that they really feel just to fulfill social expectations. And guess what? This can be a risk factor later on. Kapag natutunan ng bata yung ganitong habit, lagi na lang sila nagfulfill ng social expectations ng ibang tao, baka maging habit na niya yung hindi na niya ino-open up yung tunay niya nararamdaman, sinusuppress na lang niya, and clinical psychology will tell you that's not good. If you keep on suppressing the emotions that you really feel just to fulfill other people's expectations of you, it is not good for your mental health. That's why during this time, you have to make the child understand And this is one of the most important emotional skills, no? You need to teach the child to different ways on how to express what they really feel in a more constructive way. Pwede ka namang mag-express ng galit nang hindi nagiging violente. Pwede ka namang mag-express ng disappointment nang hindi ka nakaka-offend ng ibang tao. Again, it's all about emotional coaching. That is why adults must be the one to do these things, to coach the child on how to do this, on how to properly express emotions. Diba? Biblically speaking, sinasabi rin yan, share each other's burdens. The child must understand na meron siyang laging pamilya na pwede niyang pagsabihan ng mga tunay niyang emotions. The child may pretend not to feel those emotions pagdating sa mga kaibigan niya, but definitely the child should be confident that whatever he or she feels, the child can open up those feelings to his or her family. Kailangan ma-instill yan sa bata na hindi dapat tinatago ang emotion, dapat ini-express yan sa mga tamang tao in a more constructive way. Another effect of a more social brain during this time is the relation to the opposite sex. During this time, gender exclusivity continues. So tulad ng nasabi ko sa early childhood stage, yung mga bata, they stay within their own sexes, boys with boys, girls with girls. And that pattern of social interaction continues during this time, but it slowly changes. Cross-sex interaction begins. Kasi marami na silang alam tungkol sa sarili nilang sex, no? Alam na nila yung kultura ng lalaki, alam na nila yung kultura ng babae. Now, this time, they begin to be more curious about the culture of the other sex. And so, to satisfy that curiosity, ang ginagawa nila, sumusundot-sundot sila ng interaction sa opposite sex. Pero hindi sila nag-i-stay doon kasi culturally speaking, the reason why they're not staying there is they don't like to be ridiculed. Kasi sa kultura natin, di ba, kapag yung isang bata, madalas kasama yung mga bata in the opposite sex, marami tayong mga negative labels na naririnig, na binibigay sa mga batang yon. So these kids, to avoid those negative labels, to avoid being bullied that way, they just spend a little time with the opposite sex and then they go back to their same sex interactions. But as they enter adolescence, unti-unti nag-i-intensify na yung cross-sex interaction. In fact, by the time they enter adolescence, the peer group during adolescence, makikita nyo, mixture na ng babae at lalaki. Pero yung barkada talaga during elementary years, purely ano yan, no? Puro lalaki, purely puro babae. Okay? Effect number 5 is kids during this time, they have more willingness for play. Kasi nga, kapag nagpe-play ang mga bata, they experience a lot of positive emotions. And by nature, yung brain natin during this time would like to experience those positive emotions that we feel during play. And not to mention, this is also a form of social education. This process of playing games with other kids, remember, nagsimula ito sa early childhood. Diba? Pero ang kakaiba dito sa middle to late childhood, yung number of friends that kids play with mas dumadami. So, mas nagiging varied na. Dumadami yung variation of interaction that a child experiences during this time. And this is good because, again, when a child plays with other kids, iba't ibang mga bata, iba't ibang mga exposure, this is a good social education for them. They learn a lot of emotional skills in the process of socializing with other kids through play. Natututo sila mag-cooperate, maging sensitive, mag-imagine, maging fair, mag-solve ng conflicts. And guess what? These social skills that you can see on the screen, these are the skills that are very critical that they will be using in the future, especially when they enter adolescence where relationships become more intimate. Special mention to cooperation and conflict resolution. Diba sa tingin ko, ito talaga yung mga social emotional skills that are very crucial for you to have healthy relationships as you grow older. Paano mag-cooperate? Paano umayos ng away? Kids can learn these skills again in the process of play, in the process of playing with other kids. Kapag hindi nangyayari yan, walang interaction with other kids, hindi na-enhance yung mga social skills na yan, they will later on suffer when they enter intimate relationships. Kaya nga isang lesson dito talaga, ang mga bata talaga, early childhood man yan, middle or late childhood man yan, it is in their nature to play. They must be allowed to play. Kaya nga sabi dito, no, dear overscheduled, busy world, sabi ng bata, please leave me alone. I need to play for my future. It is my work so I can grow. Totoo yun. Kids grow emotionally. Kids grow socially when we allow them to play. But speaking of play, okay, dito rin nangyayari yung malaking risk where they wouldn't like to play with other kids because they would like to play with video games or other software gadgets. The thing is, according to studies, when kids play video games that are very violent, nagkakaroon sila ng mga negative psychological effects na nadadala nila in the future as they grow older. Now, don't get me wrong, no? Hindi ko naman sinasabi na lahat ng games na pambata during this time violent. But the chances of them being exposed to these violent video games increases the more they play with these online games. Diba? Kasi yung violence talaga yung nagbibigay buhay sa mga laro in computer games. No? So hindi malayo na along the way, if you just allow your child to be exposed to these things, ma-expose talaga siya sa mga violence. Like for example, according to studies, no, there is a direct relationship between the amount of time kids play dito sa mga video games na ito na violent and the following: school offenses, fighting, and bullying. So the more they are exposed to violent video games and the more they play with it, ito yung mga nagagawa nila after the game. Dumadami yung offenses nila sa school, dumadalas yung pakikipag-away nila sa mga kapwa nila bata, and most likely, tumataas yung tendency nila that they will bully other kids. So, as parents, as adults, we really need to be aware of these possible dangers of children being exposed to such games, especially during this time, especially in our culture today, in our society today, yung paglalaro talaga ng gadgets and online games. Napakasikat niyan, no, na marami ng mga bata ang nabibiktima because of this. Effect number 6, social approval matters. Diba? Dahil nga yung mga bata during this time, they are now less egocentric and more other-centered, na nagmamatter na rin sa kanila if other kids like them. Diba? So, problema na nila kung gusto ba sila ng mga kalaro nila. And in the literature of developmental psychology, we call this peer status. How much they are liked by their playmates or by other kids, 'di ba? 5 klase daw 'yan, no? Pwedeng ang bata ay popular, lahat gusto siya. Pwede siyang average, tama lang. Merong mga batang gusto siya, konti lang naman yung mga batang ayaw siya, tama lang. Controversial, ano to, no? Marami mga batang gusto siya, marami din mga bata ayaw siya. Rejected, maraming mga bata ayaw siya at walang may gusto sa kanya. Neglected, walang bata ang may gusto sa kanya, walang mga bata ang ayaw din siya. Kumbaga talagang ano lang sila, they're just there in the background. Nobody wants to talk to them, but they don't necessarily hate the child. So these are the different peer statuses that a child may have when they interact with other kids. And the thing is, in the literature, marami talagang research ang ginagawa sa mga bata na rejected and neglected ang peer status, because studies show that when a child's peer status is like this, rejected and neglected, hindi maganda ang nagiging outcome sa development niya. Later on, they experience depression, suicide, psychological disorders, and they become victims of bullying. That's why if you have a child, you make sure that in the school, they will not be considered as rejected and neglected, no? Dapat ang goal mo is to make them average or even popular. Yung controversial, medyo hindi rin maganda yan sa literature, no? So you have to make sure that students in the school, their peer status would be average or popular. And where does that depend? Saan ba nakadepende kung yung bata magiging popular and average? Again, it depends on the emotional skills that the child has. Kapag marunong siyang gumamit ng emotions, marunong siyang umintindi ng sarili niya, marunong siyang umintindi ng ibang tao, most likely, that child will be liked by other kids. So paulit-ulit yung sinasabi in my lessons na in the school must not only focus on the IQ part of the child, they also should focus more on the EQ side of the child. Let's not forget na yung mga bata hindi lang sila intellectual beings, they are also emotional beings. We need to teach them emotional skills. And the more they learn these emotional skills, tatandaan natin, it is contributing to their positive development as they grow older. Kapag ang bata lumalaki na pangit ang emotional skills, hindi nagiging maganda yung experience niya in his or her development. Okay? So as we end this lecture video on middle to late childhood, the following are the important lessons that I would like to share with you. Number one, it's very important. Early childhood man yan, middle or late childhood, very important, they belong to a positive family environment. The parents must always be there. The parents are there to take care of the child, to give the needs to the child. The parents must be there to continuously support the child, process the child's emotions. Positive family environment is very important for a healthy childhood. Number two, awareness of child's friends is very important. Again, I'm talking to the parents here. Napakahalaga na yung mga parents alam nila kung sino yung mga kaibigan ng mga anak nila kasi sabi ka natin kanina, yung psychological condition ng isang bata, malaki ang epekto ng kanyang choice of friends. If a child belongs to a wrong group of friends, most likely maraming mga psychological outcomes ang magsasuffer doon sa bata. So parents should really know that their child belongs to friends that contribute positively to the psychological growth of the child. Dapat kilala ng mga magulang kung sino yung kinakaibigan ng mga anak nila. Number three, I'm talking to the school. Schools really need to take bullying seriously. Dapat talaga dinidiscourage yan. Dapat talaga matitindi yung mga sanctions dyan, yung mga punishments dyan. Because again, the effect of bullying is long-lasting. When a person is bullied in such a young age, the emotional scars, the psychological wounds created by the bullying is carried over through the other developmental stages. In fact, marami akong kilala, matanda na, no? As in lolo at lola na, marami silang mga psychological traits. Matitrace back mo pa doon sa oras na binuli sila when they were still in school. So please, schools, take bullying seriously, no? Sisiguraduhin dapat ng eskwelahan na walang nangyayaring bullying sa mga estudyante. Number 4, media control is very important, especially at home. Huwag natin gagawing yaya yung mga gadgets. Huwag natin hayaan na yung mga bata naglalaro ng mga games without us knowing what are these games that they are playing. In fact, the best way to let these kids play the games is to play these games with parents so that parents can process what's happening in the game. No? Pwede mo pangaralan yung bata na halimbawa merong nangyayaring hindi maganda sa game, pumapatay ka sa game. Ipapaliwanag mo doon sa bata na hindi yan ginagawa sa tunay na buhay. 'Di ba? So media control is very important, especially at home. So parents, again, I think this is the role, more the role of the parent than the school. And last one, number 5, again, I'm talking to the parents, you need to maintain high parental monitoring with your kids. Ibig sabihin ng parental monitoring, just remember the word involvement. Involvement. Parents must be involved in practically or in basically all aspect of a child's life. Diba? Sa kanyang studies, sa kanyang paglalaro, sa kanyang pakikipagkaibigan, sa kanyang pag-explore in the environment, parents must always be there to be involved in the child's different activities. Studies after studies have shown na yung mga parents na nakakapag-maintain ng magandang parental monitoring, yung mga anak nila lumalaki ng maayos. Kumukonti ang problema sa school, hindi sila nagiging depressed. because parents, they sense that their parents value them, because they sense that their parents are always involved in their lives. In fact, sabi nga ng isang psychologist, that's the best way to say to a child that you value them, that you love them. You let them feel that you are interested in them. And the best way to express your interest to your child is by being involved in their life. The Bible teaches us, you shall teach them to your children. It's talking about the law of God. Speaking of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, and when you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. This is what you mean by parental monitoring. Constantly having interaction with your child. So the more you do all these tips, the more you do all these things that we discussed here, the more you are contributing to the positive development of your child. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.